Hello everyone, and welcome to our Clio webinar series presentation. My name is Jim Albright, and today we will be tackling the topic of IT systems modernization. And in just a moment, we'll learn about some key considerations to ensure that new and existing systems and applications will be able to deliver better customer experiences, improve business operations, and open up your business to new revenue opportunities. But before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to outline a few housekeeping items. First, we have muted all attendee lines, but during the course of the presentation, you may ask a question by clicking the drop-down menu under the Q&A section and then select all co-presenters before typing in your question. Now, we have set aside time at the end of the presentation for questions, but if we do happen to run out of time, we'll definitely follow up on any individual questions we could not get to. And finally, this webinar is being recorded, and a link of that recording will be emailed to all attendees once it has been posted to our website at Clio.com. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce to you today's speaker, Mr. Jacob Olson, who is a Principal Solutions Architect here at Clio. Jacob has more than 10 years of experience serving in technical strategy, product management, and architecture roles across a variety of industries. He has been featured at several conferences and colleges speaking on integration strategy, and today he'll be taking on the not-so-easy task of breaking down some of the core IT system modernization challenges, risks, and alternative solutions. So Jacob, thanks for being with us today.
Jim, thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to talk to everybody. So our topic for today is IT system modernization, specifically in the context of integrating and connecting all of your various systems, applications, and partners. There are a few commonalities that we pull out of this that I want to kind of describe to you as we walk through what this really is and means. The reality is this impacts virtually every industry. So in terms of impacts to customers and what people are looking for as part of IT system modernization, they're really looking to not only do things like accelerating partner onboarding times, being able to bring new connections and systems and applications on faster, be able to make sure that we're hitting SLAs and timelines that we contractually or internally impose on ourselves, try to lower cost of maintaining systems and applications, right? If we have a bunch of different applications that we've built up over the years, if we're looking to modernize those, we really want to also look at reducing the overall cost of keeping those up and the folks that have to maintain those as well. We also want to make sure that we can maybe even reverse the course of some of the outsourcing that's happened over the last 10, 15 years or so and really take more ownership over the platforms that we've built out. If we've built out connections and configurations with applications and partners, but somebody else manages them for me today, maybe that's something I want to bring back in-house. Or maybe it's the opposite, right? Maybe it's the fact that I've built out solutions that I no longer have folks internally that can manage, and I now want to look at somebody else that can manage those for me. So it's really about taking ownership in the way that your organization can specifically handle those integrations. And on top of all of this, there's an overarching theme of security, and you'll hear me hit on this point a few times today. This is more of a soft cost return on investment, but security is a key focus of all of these integrations and connections, mostly because these are external-facing gateways that have to be exposed to the outside world. And the reality is your organization is transmitting data that could be secured, that could be subject to regulatory and compliance constraints. And even if it's not, even if it's just moving back and forth ship notices and things like that that don't have any secure data in them, in today's day and age, there's no reason that we shouldn't be encrypting and protecting that data as much as possible to make it very, very hard for others to get access to. And the reality is we don't want to be one of those organizations that has a breach because that causes some pretty long-term issues to the organization itself. So protecting against those is key, and you'll see us highlight that as we talk through some of these drivers today. Now, if we look at this from a high-level problem identifier, that there are two real core issues that are at play here, and they're really diametrically opposed. The first is that my organization has to build out and maintain solutions that run our business today, right? You've built configurations, connections, application integrations, transformations today, and they have to be maintained because that's how your business does its business. So we need to make sure that those are continually maintained while at the same time having an eye toward what's coming and what other drivers are we seeing in the industry? What other new applications do I have to build into my processes? What new security requirements are coming down the pipe? And the reality is those two pieces, the maintain status quo and solve tomorrow's needs, don't fit in with each other very well. And so what we see here is that if we look at the underlying causes, there's some problems that arise where we look at the existing systems and say, well, they're fairly rigid, right? They were more than likely built to solve a specific need at a certain point in time. And to leverage those today and maintain those maybe is okay. But the problem is that they don't necessarily solve the new requirements that are coming down the pipe. If I have all of those new partners and applications and security requirements, maybe those aren't built into my existing platform. Maybe that requires additional development or new systems that I have to go stand up next to it, which introduces even more problems that we'll talk about in a moment. I mentioned also applications. There's an application explosion, if you will, that we see in the industry, across really all industries, that various systems need to be integrated and connected into even existing business processes. That could be an on-premise ERP, a warehouse management system. It could be a cloud-based CRM or storefront of some kind. The reality is this is an ever-changing and very dynamic area that we see that is requiring very agile solutions to handle those new types of deployments. And supporting those is a challenge in and of itself, and let alone having a platform that allows you the flexibility to connect to those. The other side of this too is a lack of speed in delivering those IT projects. And you don't have to be a startup to feel the crunch of these, right? If you as an organization have net new products or offerings or solutions that you want to offer to your customers or think that there's a new market that you can attack, the problem is if your solution doesn't allow you to be agile and nimble enough to get out to market with it quickly enough, you either are going to miss out on some revenue or maybe potentially all of it if another vendor gets out in front of you and can capture that space. So delivering those, being able to quickly maneuver your platform is really key across the board, and we'll talk about some of the drivers that allow for that. Within your organization, there are a couple of specific careabouts that your upper management is going to look for. Specifically, the first is operationally. So those that would be responsible for the day-to-day business, all the upkeep and how things are performing, somebody like a CIO or somebody that really is responsible for the day-to-day transactional business that you guys incur. Really the core requirements here that we're looking for are things like consolidation of integrations. If I have a whole network of integrations and applications that I've interfaced together, how are those being maintained? And I'm trying to get my arms around all of that while I continue my ongoing business. We mentioned before security. I as an operational manager need to make sure that what I'm exposing to the outside world doesn't increase my risk profile as an organization. So I need to make sure to lock down whatever I'm exposing to the outside world and make sure that this is a secure offering. Need to make sure that it's easier to manage and that it's scalable as well. And there's some drivers in there in terms of deployment methods, in terms of who would access the system, the folks internally that I have managing them as well. Right? If I have customized code and it requires a developer persona to manage, that's a bit of a cumbersome process, and I have to go out and hire very specific people for that. So as an operational manager, I'm looking to ensure that the platform that I'm investing in allows me the most flexibility, both in who can manage it, but also how I deploy that and scale it out over time to ensure that as my business grows, that I can add additional capacity or fault tolerance and things like that, just to make sure that I'm not locking myself in or putting myself into a corner. Also, automation and lowering infrastructure costs, right? If I'm looking to automate more of my configuration changes, if I want to provision new user accounts automatically, if I want to spin up and spin down instances as I require on-premise or in cloud, there's some inherent platform requirements that go into that that I would specifically care about if that were under my purview. The other side of this are those that are specifically responsible for the growth and success of the business. Somebody like a CEO or somebody else who's focused on really the outcomes. Things that we're looking for there are supporting new business models. I mentioned a moment ago, if I have new offerings that I want to put out in front of the market, I need to make sure that my platform can handle those things. And I need to make sure that whatever technology I leverage today is supporting not only the use cases that I have now, but also what I envision my use cases being in 6 to 18 months in addition. I also need to make sure that I'm meeting SLA requirements. It not only are SLAs things that I contractually agree to that I could potentially have chargebacks and have net revenue detractors. This also decreases my standing in the industry. So if I'm performing very poorly with partners, that word gets out. And ultimately, if I'm failing SLA matches over time frequently enough, I may lose out on business. I may be disqualified from opportunities because I'm known as somebody who really can't meet those SLAs. So making sure that I can not only see my performance, but also ensure my performance is extremely key. Making sure also that I'm extremely agile. We mentioned before, being able to spin up and spin down different functions, being able to solve different patterns. It doesn't really matter what the requirement is that comes down the board, but I need to make sure that I can say yes and expand my business no matter really what the requirement is that comes down to me. And at the same time, overarching across all of this is visibility. If I'm responsible for ultimately the outcome and performance of my business, I need to be able to track and record what the performance is so that I'm not blindsided by something 6 months down the road that I had no idea about. So having easily consumed dashboards and visibility tools integrating with systems that I use already. Right, your organization has its own visibility tools and BI analytics platforms. The whole point is that we want to interface with those. The platform needs to be able to speak to those so that you and those that are responsible for this can consume the data in the way that you'd like to. Now, if we kind of peel back the onion a little bit and look at the underlying process here and try to visualize what this really means in terms of IT systems that are in play as part of this overall process. We'll walk through kind of a simplistic process here. Maybe these applications are a little bit different from what you use, but the result is the same, right? There's a bunch of different systems, applications, and partners that are factored into an overarching process here, where I'm connecting, in this case, maybe an ERP with a CRM, with some other tooling for content management and maybe even talent management and talent acquisition, depending on what my processes dictate. So if I have these built out and I've integrated these together, maybe that works okay today, right? I've built out some custom scripts and I have a couple of different systems and applications that handle these integrations. The problem arises that now I have to expand that to my partners because that is part of an overarching business-to-business process, right? I have to now include those different data types and protocols and specific languages that each of those systems speak into my external-facing business systems, right? Things like EDI or XML or FTP or AS2, all of those need to fit into the opposing side of things, which are those application connectors. And doing that in and of itself is difficult, let alone if I were to now introduce another interface in here. something like a cloud connector, like an S3 bucket that I need to interface with for analytics platforms. I need to now build this out to have some of my data go to or from S3 as part of each transaction. So as I build this in, the problem that occurs is as I start adding additional pieces, additional blocks into the system, my pre-built existing platform falls apart to some degree. So I need to make sure that that I have something that can flexibly handle these. And the problem here that is introduced is, there's things like connection issues, right? Things like file corruption because the file formats are different from one system to another. Maybe there's mapping changes that are required that require actual developer people to go in and make those changes. Maybe there's an API format change, right? I connected with a customer of mine. They made a slight change to their API call, and now I have to have somebody go in and manually change that in my custom code in order to maintain connectivity with them. This is a problem because right now you can see that there's a whole bunch of different spider-webbed integrations as part of this business process. It really shouldn't be that complex, but the reality is with existing platforms, it typically is. Now, some of the challenges here, some of the issues that we see because of that, right? If we use that example and try to pick out some of the real issues that are incurred because of that, things like limited integration capabilities. Mentioned before, the ability to connect to those different systems and applications maybe in our existing platform exists, but if I need to now connect to S3 or if I need to connect to a new trading partner with a new security requirement, I have to go to the drawing board and try to figure out a way to make that happen from scratch. I wind up then with siloed integrations where I have different piecemeal solutions that are meant to do individual components of my process, and it's really hard to get those to talk to each other, and it's even harder to maintain those, right? Maybe they require different skill sets, maybe they're written in different languages, maybe they're totally different UIs, and having visibility across those is extremely difficult, let alone trying to architect them for scalability. If I have 5 different solutions and applications and custom code bits that are built out to solve my overarching process, how do I build that so that it's scalable and reliable from an architectural perspective? And then how do I manage the people that are maintaining that, right? It's a different skill set that's required per solution potentially. And it's hard to maintain and build those out from an infrastructure standpoint. If I want to deploy new servers, if I want to do upgrades and things like that, do I upgrade one side of things and it breaks the rest of them? You can see here that there's again a spider web of integration requirements, and because those different pieces aren't necessarily built with the others in mind, it winds up posing some real challenges from a management standpoint. Now, again, when we look at this, the root causes under all of this come from the fact that we have existing systems, legacy systems that are in place that solve some of these problems today, right? Individually solve bits and pieces of the problems, and they work to some degree. And it's difficult to look at and say I should touch those. But at the same time, not touching them means that we're falling further and further behind. We wind up with customized integrations and those that lack scale, right? I build out a custom script to solve one use case with a particular partner or customer, and all of a sudden I see that times 50, and I now need to maintain that across my integrations. And that's really hard to do, right? Especially if we want to try to productize that or bring that into the fold. That's much harder to maintain from a scalability standpoint. And we talked about those siloed solutions. Those siloed applications and components make it really hard to manage these. And again, from a visibility standpoint, breaks that all down and makes it so that they're all piecemealed together individually, and it's really hard to maintain that. Resources is one that isn't usually focused on, but is a huge factor in here. Again, if I have different requirements, different skill sets that are needed for each of these solutions, it's problematic because I now have to double, triple my team that's managing the solution, or at the very least go out and hire really skilled folks or borrow them from other internal parts of the organization that they could be doing other revenue-generating type projects, like developing new parts of our application or our offering. But instead, they have to now go in and modify code or try to backtrack and figure out what we did 15 years ago as part of a unique custom code script that we built out. It's really hard to maintain that, and from a cost perspective, it's a very negative thing where we have to go out and hire very high. Not only are they impactful resources, but they ultimately cost quite a bit as well. And enablement. This is another piece that I think is often overlooked. Being able to manage these systems is key, not just from an ongoing standpoint, but in terms of upgrades and rollout as part of your infrastructure. How do we deploy new servers? How do we deploy upgrades? How do we maintain these, ideally, infrastructure as code, whether it's on-premise and the cloud? How do we build those so that they're sustainable? And the reality is today's DevOps strategies are becoming more and more advanced, where I really want to have a push-button architecture that I can deploy. I can work more toward an elastic and immutable infrastructure so that I don't have to worry about individually standing up and managing and monitoring servers. I can have code that I can deploy over and over again. It makes managing those much more simplistic. But again, if I have a bunch of different solutions I have to manage to, I have to build unique scripts and code for all of that. That's assuming that those solutions even support those deployment methods. And if they don't, and that's my direction as an IT organization, that's a problem. So there are, the way that we at Clio see it, there are a few core capabilities that are required in a platform that will help to ensure that we don't run into some of these issues presented by having those outdated IT systems. So first of all, end-to-end integration. We need to make sure that this is a system, a platform that can handle basically any and all types of data formats, communication protocols, security requirements, and can handle those internally, externally, source, target. It doesn't matter how you piece the Legos together. The end-to-end integration needs to be extremely flexible and needs to not only support what today's requirements look like, but also what you're custom coding for in the next 6 months and the other requirements that come down the pipe to you in the next year or two as well. If you're investing in a platform, we need to make sure that it solves today's needs and gives you flexibility down the road. Control and visibility is one where if we can see what's happening in the system, we can react to it. We need to have visibility over not only the transactional details and administrative logging, but we need to be able to view those at a high level and look for problem customers. How frequently are we failing SLAs? Have we not received payment on invoices that we've sent out for 6 months? And some of you might laugh at that use case, but we've had customers. I've personally had customers come to me and say that they were missing hundreds of thousands of dollars in payments because they simply didn't realize that they weren't paid back. That's somewhat systematic, but we need to make sure that there's visibility across all of the points in the integration process so that we can spot those issues before they rear their heads 6 months later and we're trying to track down and get the money from those customers that we need to. A hybrid platform. The other piece that you've heard me talk about here is cloud, on-prem. I've been a little nebulous in those terms. The reality is there's different steps that the different organizations are in right now. Some are 100% locked in, cloud all the way. Everything we build out is cloud native. That's our strategy. That's cool. You need to find a platform that supports that. At the same time, other organizations say, nope, no cloud. We'd like to maybe someday, but we don't see any path there in the short term. That's fine too. Again, you need to make sure that there's a platform that supports that deployment method and that allows you the flexibility to handle your integrations in that pattern. At the same time, though, there are certainly going to be parts of the process that are either specifically cloud native or specifically on-prem native that we need to interface with, and we need to make sure that those are folded into the process of our integrations. And having a platform that solves those not only deployment methods, but also connectivity methods and security requirements, and is really cloud agnostic, meaning that it doesn't matter if you today invest in Amazon Web Services and then tomorrow decide that you're going to roll everything to Microsoft's Azure or Google Cloud Platform. It doesn't really matter where you put the software. The platform needs to play nice with wherever you put it, and needs to play nice with not only your strategy today, but knowing that in virtually every organization, whether we think we can or not, we have a cloud strategy. So we need to make sure that we're having an eye toward being able to support that in the future. Even if today we don't see that there's a path, we still want to try to support that hybrid integration strategy as we move forward. I mentioned DevOps before. DevOps is a really key term that I've personally seen in the industry really in the last year or so take hold and be more pervasive. It's something that requires a very specific platform to support, right? Because the toolkit that you deploy, whether it's again on-prem, cloud, or hybrid, needs to support being able to be deployed as infrastructure as code. It needs to have APIs that can be provisioned headlessly. It needs to have the ability to be scripted in Puppet and Chef and Docker and managed through Kubernetes and things like that, right? We need to make sure that those newer age technologies are ones that can be supported no matter the deployment method. And the more we can get toward that push-button architecture to deploy not just the initial architecture, but also things like disaster recovery, right? I can't have people going in and making manual changes as part of a disaster recovery switchover when my recovery time objective is 1 hour, right? I just don't have the runway to do that. So I need to make sure that everything can be scripted accordingly. Even if your disaster recovery timelines aren't that tight today, having that platform that supports those in the future is key as those timelines do tighten up, and we've seen that across multiple different industries over the last few years. Cloud migration is another one that's key here too. Again, even if there's no eye toward cloud today, having that as an option in the future is key. Making sure that you're not locking yourself into a deployment method is really the goal here, and enabling you as an organization to have flexibility to move the platform where you see fit in the future is key, right? Not lock yourself into a deployment method overall. Things like governance, being able to keep tabs over what the system is doing, and having visibility around that is really key as well, and making sure that we can always track against performance and we can spot issues before they really become problems. And then again, so partner onboarding we've talked about a few times. That one I think goes without saying, but it's worth at least hitting on. We need to be able to speed up our time to bring new connections and partners on. Partners may not just mean having an AS2 connection or an SFTP mailbox that I expose to a partner. It may mean taking the existing configurations I have for a partner and adding a Salesforce connection so that I can automatically onboard from my Salesforce or CRM or wherever I store those details and automatically provision a new configuration. It may mean adding in a connector to my warehouse management system behind the scenes so that my new trading partner can talk directly to my WMS instead of having a bunch of different manual configurations as part of that. There's different nuances to the partner onboarding. It's not just creating accounts. It's making sure that all of the overarching ecosystem of connections is enabled as part of that overall connection. And then again, security is the other piece in here that is absolutely required. Not only is this something that we need to make sure that we lock down from an exposure standpoint, but we need to make sure that we're supporting all of the latest security standards and cipher patterns and security algorithms, and that you can set different standards. We still have customers that speak SSL 3.0. That's bad. Ideally, if any of you on the phone are listening that still speak that, we should get away from it, right? We need to make sure that the platform that we have, if it's antiquated, that doesn't support the newer age technologies, we need to fix those very quickly. If there are low-hanging things that we can go in and configure and change our settings, that's even better, right? Then you as an organization have control over what security standards you support, even if the vendor that you go with has support for lower algorithms. Again, if you're 100% internal, maybe you don't care so much that you speak an insecure protocol like FTP or something like that. But if it's external and there are prying eyes, we need to make sure that we hide as much from them as we can, and even do things like looking for bad actors, right? If somebody's trying to brute force their way into your system, we should be able to spot that. We should be able to proactively blacklist accounts. We should be able to look for adverse events and spot them and take some resolution immediately. Integrating with other upstream systems like a firewall to make sure that we're locking down the system as much as possible. And again, protecting data where necessary. And this even rolls into compliance and things like that, or maybe we have to maintain encryption across the board. Data can never land on disk in an unencrypted fashion. Having a platform that supports all of those different types of process flows and can secure the data no matter where it's going to or coming from, that's really the key here. Now, if we envision maybe a best case scenario here where we kind of revisit the process flow we showed before, where we still have all the same systems that we need to connect with, ERPs and storefronts and talent acquisition and S3 and Salesforce and CRMs, the whole point here is that we should be able to connect all of these, not in a piecemeal solution, not something that requires individual components for every single piece, but through a centralized platform, right? Something that can support all of these use cases and pattern flows, and allows you to have a centralized point to not only manage, but also then cluster and scale and ensure that it's a secure offering as well. And then on top of that, we should also have visibility, right? If we centralize all of these components into one singular platform, we should have visibility across all of the processes that flow through there. Whether it's traditional EDI processes, whether it's XML or CSV or JSON web service calls, it doesn't really matter what form it takes. If it flows through the platform, it should be visible, it should be centralized. Now, from a business benefit standpoint, there's really two sides of this that I see. There's the initial side where we look at kind of the revenue generation, faster time to revenue, exchanging data faster with partners, increasing transaction volumes, right? By enabling some of these best case scenarios here where we can collapse architecture and make it easier for not only my internal users to manage, but also for your external customers to interface with, because you can say yes to their new requirements, we can drive faster revenue. We can drive more revenue and faster time to that revenue. We can also look at cost reduction, right? We can reduce infrastructure costs by removing individual one-off solutions that we've had to maintain. We can deprovision servers that may have been used before. We can also look at reallocating different resources, really high-value resources that have to maintain today's solutions, to something more revenue generating, and let them impact the organization in the way that they should, and not be stymied by some low-level script that they have to maintain just out of necessity. And then, of course, there's compliance. It always goes into this, depending on your industry, of course. But if there are compliancies that you have to adhere to, and you breach those, that is the first thing that will detract from your revenue generation, from fines to consultants having to come in to do analysis on your clunky integrations. That's a big cost. So the more we can centralize, the more we can standardize on compliance and ensuring that we adhere to those, that's key. The other side of this is ensuring that we have operational excellence, right? Making sure that we have seamless end-to-end flows, making sure that that we don't have multiple systems that handle these things, making sure that we can provide elasticity as part of our offering. I can spin up and spin down instances, again, whether on-prem or cloud, it doesn't matter. I can flex to match what my demands are, not just today, but down the road. Maybe I can go to an elastic infrastructure and get more of those cloud-like outcomes, even if I'm on-premise. I can spin up and spin down instances accordingly. I can make sure that the system I have can handle any pattern of integration that I'm looking for as well. Again, it doesn't matter if the source or target is EDI or JSON or XML or spreadsheet, or it doesn't matter. As long as those patterns can be supported in an any-to-any fashion, that's the key. And making sure that we have those as capabilities in the platform, that's what we need to look for. And so if we kind of tie this all back and look at what what we get out of this, first is that seamless end-to-end data transformation, right? We can make this a complete process that not only handles all those data types, handles all the protocols that we need to speak, from web services to application integrators. Having pre-built application connectors is also key in this, right? I don't necessarily want to build out a web service connector for every application I have to connect to, whether on-prem or in the cloud. And we see more and more of those SaaS-type architectures come into play, iPaaS that we have to interface with. Having those pre-built connectors allows us to have more of a complete offering as part of the platform, so that when you're looking to add those new connections, to add those new steps of the process, again, you can say yes and don't have to look for other outside solutions. It's already built into the platform. Having that all be centralized is another really key process. Again, if I'm managing point solutions, it becomes very cumbersome. It becomes very hard to really centralize those. If I can collapse those into one platform, from my management standpoint, it really helps me to ensure that I get the best outcome. And I don't have to worry about differences between platforms and visibility-wise. And there's just so many benefits that we gain by collapsing that architecture, cost savings, all those things that really roll into that. That's really one of the biggest impacts that we see from customers across industries. Compatibility as well. Again, all of your deployment methods, whether it's on-prem, cloud, hybrid, if you want to script and automate your deployments, if you want to provision accounts headlessly, if you want to have disaster recovery that's done as a push button, any of those checkboxes, if you use them, having a platform that supports those allows you to meet those business requirements. Right? Somebody comes down on you and says, we need to have a disaster recovery plan in place by next year that says we'll have a 1-hour recovery time objective. That's not easy to meet, but if the platform can give you those added benefits of having those pieces, high availability and all those things as part of the platform itself, it makes your job a lot easier. Scalability is the other side of that architectural side, where if I'm looking to expand the solution out in the future, right? I expect that my growth is going to continue at 20 to 40% per year. That's great, but I need to make sure that I build out a solution today and invest in a platform that can not only solve my patterns and my process flows today, but also then supports those over time. Just as a personal aside, we had a customer that did exactly that, where they brought us in and said, we don't want to test for what our volumes are today. We want to test for what our volumes are expected to be in 5 years. And so the reality is that it was the exact right thing to do. Make sure we're future-proofing the solution. Make sure we're not just focusing on what's in front of us today. And then flexibility. Again, this is just the ability to say yes to all of the new use cases that come into play, all the protocols, all of the new applications that pop up, all of the new data formats and security requirements, being able to say yes and bring that business on without having to kind of go back and say, I don't quite know if I can do that. That's a sign that the platform isn't right for the business. We need to make sure that the first response response is, yes, we think we can do it. Let's go verify. And making sure that what you invest in today can handle those today and down the road is exceptionally key. Now, with that, I wanted to share a couple of examples where we've seen success with that here at Clio, and give you a little bit of a sense for how customers have realized this in the real world. So 2 examples we want to show, and of course we've got white papers for these on our website if you're looking for a little more information, but we'll talk about Dot Foods first. Dot Foods is a very large food redistributor. So basically, they ship and purchase and move around all kinds of goods across their trucks on a daily basis. They have really large transactional volumes and do everything from moving data around, purchase orders, advanced ship notices. They've got a bunch of different processes that they integrate, and being able to support all of those was really key. And the problem for them was that all of those EDI and non-EDI processes were very cumbersome to manage, and really ended up in their existing solution being very, very high touch, very manual process, a lot of custom scripting and coding that required really intensive user interaction with the system, which ultimately, again, is high cost and resulted in some fairly heavy error rates. And they set a goal up front to automate 80% of their purchase orders when they looked to invest in a new platform. And what was really cool is when they went with Clio's solution, they not only were able to meet that goal of 80% automation, but also then increased their capacity for purchase order handling by 20% right off the bat. So again, this is a really good use case where we're looking at not only the existing EDI type transformations, non-EDI types that get folded in, where we built custom code and scripts to handle those over the years. Maybe it works, but there's a better way to do it. In this case, Clio's solution was perfect for them to be able to fit in, solve those, especially handle things like automation and wizard-driven interfaces, and make it easier for their team to manage the system rather than go in and build custom code. And again, removing those manual entry points and making it easier for them to maintain this over time. And the quote that we liked from their senior e-commerce analyst was, "We sought a solution to automate orders from our customers. With Clio, everything is automated and drag and drop." Again, it just speaks at the interface that's provided, and the key here is to make sure that your users are empowered in the solution and can manage it in the way that you prefer. The other use case that I'll talk about quickly is Steel Technologies. So Steel Technologies is a leading steel manufacturer across a whole slew of industries. They've got some pretty cool manufacturing processes that they support, and they had in place an EDI solution, which it worked. It was fairly cumbersome and again required somewhat of a high touch, especially for mapping changes and things like that. But the problem was that they had a bunch of new requirements for non-EDI processes, XML and web services, JSON, that they simply couldn't handle. And so they really looked at a platform that could future-proof them to solve all of today's needs, as well as handle whatever requirements come down the pipe in the future. And in this same case, they went with Clio's solution, and we're able to then not only centralize everything like we talked about before, centralize all of the connections, all the process flows, all of the integrations, bring those into one centralized platform, but then also make that scalable. Their business is growing tremendously, and they really wanted to make sure that this was something that solved their volume needs for today and down the road, which is part of what the Clio platform did for them. And then the reduction of partner onboarding time, customer onboarding by 60% or more was really key here too. Again, removing that high touch process of building out new maps and configurations was key as part of reducing that overall time. So this was another one that we saw a lot of value from. and we'll let you read the quote from them as well. These guys leverage basically the entirety of the platform, all of the connectors, all of the syntaxes, and a couple of the application connectors, and are a really good example of what the Clio platform can do. So, Jim, I'll pass it back to you. That's everything that I had from a presentation standpoint today.
All right, fantastic presentation, Jacob. You know, the point that really came across loud and clear, to me at least, was the high risk of maintaining all of those customized one-off integrations. I mean, I can't even imagine what orchestrating so many data flows with these pieced together siloed systems and applications is like, especially when they're so necessary for sharing critical business information. So I guess that's what people call swivel chair integration. All right, well, great job, Jacob. Let's take some questions that came through during the course of the presentation. I've got one here around automation. It says, you had mentioned automating processes like partner onboarding. Can you give more detail on this, particularly around template reuse?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, automation is all about removing potential failure points, and basically building out not only templates that can be reused by your users, but also exposing APIs that you could use for automating some of those as well, right? Or maybe even building scripts that can handle some of those automations. The whole point there is that we really want to reduce the risk points. The more user interaction we have with the system, the more potential risk there is. There's always going to be some level and need for user interaction, and there should be, right? Some of those more advanced processes like mapping especially. But for things like partner onboarding, a lot of that really can be automated or reused as part of a template process. And again, having that as part of the platform is really key to be able to reuse those over and over again without having to go to script every time we want to build a new partner configuration.
All right, awesome. One of our viewers today is asking about scalable architecture. Can you provide a little more context as to how you can achieve this?
Absolutely. So scalable architecture is really about having systems and applications that can not only grow with you as your business volumes increase, but also allows you to meet uptime requirements set by your organization and by your partners. There's a couple things that go into that, right? You can achieve that by investing in a platform that includes things like load balancing and high availability and disaster recovery, but it also means having a platform that can support those more advanced deployment strategies like I talked about, more DevOps-focused strategies that allow you to really run more infrastructure as code and allow you to, again, get toward those cloud-like outcomes, whether you're in the cloud or not, and then allow you to really get elastic infrastructure, immutable infrastructure, handle upgrades seamlessly. Those are really core components of building building that architecture out. And then the other thing there is, it just means playing nicely with those deployment strategies, whether you're on-prem, in the cloud, or some mixture, and then ensuring the platform will grow and morph with you as your needs change.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Obviously, it's more complex than that, but at the highest of levels, I think you nailed it there. All right, I got a couple questions here around manual processes, so I'm going to try to consolidate these two here. One is around, I guess, your point earlier where you say that we can help limit or minimize customized integrations, and the question is, you can't really get away from customization, especially when you have a new application that you're trying to implement.
Yeah, look, the truth is you'll never get away from some level of customized integrations. Your business is unique, and we shouldn't pretend like there's some catch-all magic solution that fits every bit of uniqueness across all organizations. We really should be focused on eliminating as many of the one-off integrations and solutions that we can, especially those that don't require the that don't bring into play the uniqueness of your organization. So an example would be Salesforce. We have this question all the time is, okay, great, you can do Salesforce connector, but my implementation is unique, right? We tweak these fields and we have these specific templates. That's across every customer in every industry. So there's no one size fits all. The reality is we need to have connectors that and automate as much of those processes as we can, and then treat the uniqueness and those customizations as one-off processes, mostly as tweaking those connectors, right? So for Salesforce, at that example, the way that we at Clio do it is we have a connector that does all of the communication to and from Salesforce. We reach up and pull down the configurations based on your implementation, and then let you pick and choose which fields and data to actually use. If you go with another platform and look at something like a Salesforce connector that says, here's the out-of-the-box connector, it does this within these rigid four walls. If you do something outside of that, you have to go custom code that. That really there negates any value that you gain by having a connector, because now you're maintaining custom code, you're maintaining custom scripts. We want to solve all of the common use cases with built-in connectors, and then let you handle the uniqueness of your business as a slight tweak through the template, through the connector on top of that. But the more we can automate of that, the better. But yeah, there's no way we'll ever get to 100% automation, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely think that's reasonable. And again, just like with applications, with partner onboarding, it's no different. If you have like partners that you're doing business with, you can reuse the template that you built there, and then probably get yourself at least 80% of the way to onboarding a similar partner. And then, like you just said, just do some tweaking and you're up and running. I think we've seen the time reduced like 65%. Something like that for onboarding new partners. All right. Let's talk about consolidation here. I got a couple more questions, but let's get this one on consolidation because it kind of mirrors what we were just talking about. You talked a lot about consolidating integration, but it's just not that simple. You just can't take existing integrations and weave them into a single platform. Can you explain more about this?
Yeah,
that's
a fair assessment. And the reality is, modernization is a journey. You're not gonna get to a point where you solve this overnight. The best advice, and from my experience in the industry, is take stock today of what systems are being used and how those processes are being handled. And have an eye toward what is going to be required in the future, and start figuring out what steps we can take to modernize the low-hanging fruit, if you will. If there's outdated systems that we can start getting off of, if there's a few common systems that handle the same processes, right? If you've got a dedicated AS2 system and an FTP system and SFTP system, let's consolidate those, right? Those are kind of low-hanging pieces that we can really get at day one. And again, it's not an overnight journey, but the sooner you can start down the path of modernizing those systems, the better off the organization will be in the long term.
Yep. Okay. I'm going to take one more question here. This one you touched earlier on our 8 capabilities that you addressed. So this one says, my company is not yet moving to the cloud, but are looking into options. What is your suggested path to eventually migrating core systems to the cloud?
This one comes back to that whole hybrid model that I talked about a little bit earlier. There's some cases where it makes sense to push everything to the cloud. There's other cases where it makes sense to host everything on-premise. And more likely that there's cases where there's some hybrid approach to that, and more likely a phased approach where some of those parts may coexist. No matter your path, you need to have a platform that's going to support those needs today and in the future. I've seen a lot of our customers get a huge amount of value out of a flexible licensing model that lets you choose today and down the road where to put this, right? Without having to go back and write up specific contracts or rebuy a solution or do a full migration. Being able to deploy it in the way that you need to today and integrate it in the way that makes sense for you, and then maybe lift and shift later, on-prem to cloud, cloud to on-prem, or maybe even change the management model, right? So today your systems are managed by your folks, but you've got a couple people that are going to retire soon. That's very, very common. And we've seen customers that have looked to say, okay, we're going to continue to manage those for the time being, but we're going to start the steps of interfacing with a vendor that we can maybe even offload some of those capabilities to and let them manage some of those things down the road too. So again, it's more of a journey. same with the answer before, but the overall answer is make sure you have a platform that lets you deploy and manage in the way that you want to today, and that you don't lock yourself in for if you want to make a change 18 months down the road.
Absolutely. Excellent. All right. I think I'm going to wrap up the Q&A here. I definitely want to talk about our next webinar, which is happening next month on the 20th. This presentation will outline some best practices that you all can take to rapidly establish new B2B partner relationships and implement new business applications without disrupting any of your current operational flows. So this is very similar to, Jacob, some of the things that you had addressed. We will open up the registration event page shortly on our website at clio.com/events, so make sure you check that out. And as always, if you want to learn more about what we've discussed today, check out our social sphere, our website, our blog. Please do follow us on LinkedIn. A lot of great thoughts. We do try to get up there regularly, so please check us out there. Or, of course, just give us a call if you have any questions. So with that, thank you again, Jacob, for a wonderful presentation, for all of you for spending time with us today. We definitely look forward to seeing everybody on our next webinar on partner application onboarding next month. So with that, I'll say thanks and have a good rest of your day.